Morning. Let's stand together in worship. You envelop me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has gonna be afraid, 'cause these waves are only waves. I'm not gonna be afraid. I'm not gonna be afraid. I'm not gonna fear the storm. You are greater than this roar. I'm not gonna fear the storm. I'm not gonna fear it all. Peace, be still. Say the word and
Well, it got quieter. At least I still have a voice, because that last song was really awesome. Okay. I have something that I have been waiting to talk about for probably at least 2 months. So for me to contain something that long is like pretty good, just saying. So what happened was I heard something 3 times from different people, some of them experts, and I got annoyed, like ticked, like seriously put out, because it wasn't true. But what happens is when we hear things that aren't true and we believe them, they function in our life like they're true. And for example, I have a friend, still have a friend, and we've been friends for like at least 5 years. And we're chatting one night, and we were just talking about some pretty serious things. And she said something to me. We were on the phone, and I'm like, "What? What did you say?" And she said something. Well, because I have mental illness. You've never talked to me or treated me different, even though I'm mentally ill. And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And I'm like, "You're not mentally ill." And she goes, "Well," I said, "Why? Why would you ever think that?" And she said, "Well, because when I was 13, an adult in her life told her that she was mentally ill." My heart ripped. I was like, "You've got to be kidding me." So she lived her whole life, and we were older, like a long time, probably 40 years, believing a lie about herself. So because I heard this, and I'm like, "Oh, turn my light on. Someone turn my light on." You'd think after like a year and a half, we'd be good at this. No, is that better? There we go. Okay. Squirrel. Okay. What was I saying? Something really important. It was really important, right? I forget. Okay. Oh, people saying things. So what I heard, and people have been saying a lot of things the last little while. And one of the things that I heard was this whole scenario, I'm using my words really carefully today, is so hard on the youth. It has wrecked their lives, and they are never going to recover. Are you surprised? I got mad. I was like, "Excuse me?" Now, for starters, I'm just going to give you a little bit of historical information. We've been like about a year at that point in time. There's people who lived through 2 world wars. One of them, they would have been teenagers in. 4 to 5, 6 years of war, like bombs going off, having to leave. Like they lived through, and you know what? They're really well-adjusted people. They're kind of seniors now. And you're like, "I don't know, there's some crazy old folks out there." And it's true. But it's like, who would ever say something that black and white statement? And I'm a psychologist. I got it. He had letters after his name, PH something. PH dumb. Oh. Okay, so I was like, so I got a little irritated. So I'm talking to God, and I'm like, "This is not okay." And he says, "Well, why don't you tell them a story?" And I'm like, "Well, it better be a good story." I was mad. And he said, "It's a good story." And he said, "You need to tell them about Joseph." And I'm like, "Good, I know that story." So this is a true story. It happened like thousands and thousands of years ago, but it's recorded in the Bible, and it's absolutely true. Like there are details about it that when you look at it compared to everything that's going on right now, you'll go, "That just blows my mind." So the story starts with him when he's 17 years old, which is like teenager. Okay, so by the time you're 17, it's a little late to be deciding how you're going to, by then you kind of decided how your life is going to be. If you're like, "Oh, I'm 16, I better hurry," it's like, it's okay, you got a year, so, But, and we keep changing. I don't do anything that I used to do when I was younger. I'm too old to do the things I did when I was younger. But I still think. And then my body goes, "You can't do that." Anyways, Joseph was 17 years old when the story starts, and he has 10 older brothers and one younger brother. And his older brothers seriously did not like him. There's like a little family dysfunction, and we all have a little, if we could be honest. But there was multiple reasons why they didn't like them. He was with, I think they had, there was different moms, because that's kind of how it went in that family. They were building kind of empires, and so this guy had 4 wives, and some of them were wives, and some of them were secondary wives, and so he's out watching the sheep with some of his brothers, and they were misbehaving, and he came home and he tattled. I mean, he informed his dad what had happened. And, I think he had a very solid line of what was right and what was wrong. So he tells his dad, hey, this is what's going on. And they, instead of going like, okay, yeah, we blew it, they just got mad at him, and they hated him. And they were incredibly wealthy ranchers, and they had extensive livestock, and so they were a rich family. The second thing is within that, so they were kind of princes. And his dad made him a coat or a cloak or a tunic. And this is not, just your everyday. Okay, it was ridiculously out there. And it was different than anybody else's, and it was more rich, and it was just absolutely fantastic. Probably something a girl should have worn, no, I'm just saying. And what it did is, it didn't matter where he went, it broadcast to the whole world that he was his dad's favorite. His dad might, how in school you stick those signs on your back that says, kick me. That's basically what his dad did when he gave him the coat. Because his brothers just went, oh, you're just so special. You're just a favorite. Tattle. And they didn't like him. And the third thing that happened, and I'll just give you a little background from it, is Joseph decided that he was going to have a relationship with God, and he talked with God. Now, his great-grandpa did, and his grandpa did, and his dad did. But the thing with God is we have to decide for ourselves, at some point in time. It's a personal thing with God, and it doesn't matter what our parents or anybody else do. What are you going to have a relationship with God? And I don't know where his brothers were, but he talked with God. And I know that because God talked back to him. And he worshipped him, and he didn't worship idols. And I'm just going to stop and talk about that for a minute before I get to my big point, because it's really, really important. All the countries around them worshipped idols that made out of stones and rocks and things. And some of them, it's really important what you worship. Some of them is like, if you need something or if you want something, this idol required that you sacrifice your firstborn. You burn them on the fire, on the altar. Any firstborns here? Oh, aren't you glad? Yeah, because it's like, oh, there was a drought this year, here goes my kid. Now that's a little sick, but that's what was going on. People worship other things. Sometimes people worship money, they worship things, they worship the opinion of other people. Like, for example, I get a new shirt. It's like I'm feeling like really sweet, and I go to school. I think it's my favorite shirt. I'm going to wear it like forever. And my girlfriend says like, ooh, where'd you get that? And then you never wear it again. Come on. Because, so then I'm worshiping them. They are controlling my behavior. What do they think? Well, she didn't like it. That's how when you can tell by how you make your decisions what you're worshiping. And the thing about whatever controlling your life is your God is all of the other gods and everything else want something from you. And God does too. He says, I want you to give me absolutely everything. Because if you give me control of your life, I will give you the best life you could possibly have. Boom. That's what God says. Whereas the other God says, if you want something, sacrifice your child, do this, right? Not so good. But so you have to know that about God. He's like, I want you to give me your life because I want to make it awesome. Will you let me make it awesome? And it's like, okay. So Joseph's talking to God, and God's talking to him, and I know he's talking to him because God gave him a dream, and dreams are one of the ways that God talks about us. Now, you can have a dream because you had too much pizza, like the night before. Or you can have a dream because you're worried about something, or excited about something, or just because. But a dream from God is different. And so he has this dream. And he's like, because they're ranch, he's like, okay, so we're making sheaves, those stalks of wheat things, and we're gathering together, and my sheep went in the middle, and it got bigger. He's telling his brothers this. And he said, all your sheep around bow down to my sheep. Isn't that cool? And they're like, are you kidding me? Like, did I mention he was 11 out of 12? So on the hierarchy of things, he's a little runt. It's like, we bow down to our Father. You bow down to we are never bowing down to you. And so culturally, when you bow down to someone, that's the one who rules over you. So they were really angry with him. They didn't like him. And it gets better or worse. He has another dream. And in this dream, the sun and the moon and all the stars bow down to him. But he doesn't just run impetuously to tell his brothers that. He also tells his dad. So his dad goes like, I get the stars things, but the sun and moon, that'd be like me. And all the moms like, dads don't bow down to their sons in this culture. You've got to be kidding. And so his dad's like, Joseph, you got to stop this. And I'm thinking, Dad, you put the coat on him. But anyways, his dad actually went away and he thought about it. He goes, something's going on here. And then, sometimes life repeats. His dad says, hey, you want to go check on his brother? And he goes, yeah. So again, all 10 this time, are out herding sheep. And he goes to find them, and he gets lost. And then he gets found, and somebody says, actually, they moved from here. They're way over there. And so he's coming to check on them. He's actually a very family-oriented guy, and he loves them. He's going to check on his brothers, and they can see him coming a mile away. Camouflage, this coat is not. And they're like, here comes the dreamer. It's time to kill him. And they were plotting and figuring out how to kill him. I'm just saying, if you're a younger brother, get along with your older brother. It's just my wisdom for the day. So the oldest, Reuben says, no, don't kill him. Just throw him deep down into this dry well. Thank goodness it was well. And his plan was, when they started heading back home, he'd go like, oh, I forgot something. And he was going to go and he was going to fish him out. And he's probably going to say, okay, you say that this guy passed by and he helped you get out, and then you get home and you shut up and don't say anything. Because I saved you this time, but I might not. That was his plan. So it's like, okay, but he goes and does something. Reuben goes and does something. And the brothers have stripped off his coat, ripped it. They're probably dancing on it in the dust. They've tossed him in the well. And what do you do next? Have lunch. So they sit down to have lunch. And while they're sitting there having lunch, this caravan starts coming. And they see this caravan coming. And Judah, one of the middle brothers, gets his idea. He's like, why should we get nothing out of this? If we kill him, we don't get anything. But if we sell him as a slave to that caravan, we'll get some money. And really, we're his brothers. We shouldn't really kill him. But this would take care of it. And so they do it. And the caravan goes, and Reuben comes back, and he looks in the well, and he loses it. He's like, there's going to be no place on the earth that I'm going to be able to hide from my dad and his wrath. What have you guys done? And they're like, want to split up the money? And he says, yeah. So they, 20 pieces of silver, 2 each. So they said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So they took his coat, and they killed a goat, and they rubbed his coat in the blood, and they went home, and they showed it to their dad, and he assumes what they hoped he assumed that had happened, and that was that a wild animal, and there were bears and lions out there, had shredded him to pieces, and that his son was dead. In the meantime, Joseph, he's not riding one of the camels on the caravan. He's probably tied and walking behind with all the other slaves. He has no coat to indicate they thought they bought just a nobody. And at this point in time, this 17-year-old kid's got to decide, he's had these dreams. It's not looking good. He's like, so what am I going to do? And I suspect he talked to God, but he made some really, really wise decisions. The very first thing is, I think he's like, hey, and he started to learn the language. I think it took him a few days. It's like, I got to learn the language. If we're going to Egypt and speak Egyptian, I need to learn, because the more I can communicate and whatever, and I can hear what's going on, the better it'll be for me. So times was rough, and he actually decided, I'm going to learn something extra. I know this has been a time where like, oh gee, we're getting less work because we're not in school. Yay! But Joseph actually intensified. And the other thing he did is he recognized that he's no longer a son, he's a slave. But he's going to stand like a son. And his posture was still going to be one of royalty, and I think he smiled. Because if you're going to come and buy a slave, you're not going to buy the one that's like, oh, I want out, and I'm going to run away, and I hate you, and all whatever. You're going to buy the one, the best guy is going to buy the one that looks happy. And going to say, hey, buy me, an Egyptian. And he actually got bought by a very, very wealthy man, and this man's name was Potiphar. It's very important to know what Potiphar did for a living. He was the captain and the chief executioner of the royal guard. Now, Egypt was not a democracy, so if the king decides somebody ticked him off, it's like off with your head. Like, do you understand this? I know that was the French Revolution, but chief executioner is my boss. Yay. But you know what? The Lord was with Joseph. That line is actually in the book. The Lord was with Joseph, and though he was a slave, he was successful and prosperous. So he started doing things, and he started taking care of things. And it says Potiphar could tell that the Lord was with him, because everybody had gods. He's like, I don't know who your gods are, but everything you do works out and is better. And so what happened as he was so successful, Potiphar made him supervisor. The slave became the supervisor over absolutely everything in his house. And this was Potiphar's, this was all that was left. What should I eat today? What's for lunch? That's what it said. The only thing he worried about was the food on his plate. Everything else Joseph took care of. Now this is the thing. Even though he was only 17, maybe 18 by now, he's a fine looking man. He good looking. Really good looking. He good looking. Guys are like, yeah, I am too. He was so good looking that Potiphar's wife decided, I want me that man. So she's proposing, come sleep with me. And this is what he said. He said, no. My master has put everything in my care. He has kept nothing from me. Nothing in his house I don't have access to except you. Like if it was a girl thing, it would be like, I could go into your closet and wear all your designer clothes. Like, that's what it says. I have access to absolutely everything except you. You're his wife. And this is the thing. He doesn't say, are you crazy? Do you know what he does for a living? He'll cut off my head. He didn't say, that wasn't his answer. He was not the least concerned about what her husband's reaction was going to be. He just said, how can I do this great evil and sin against God? See, when our lives aren't controlled by what other people think or what other people might do, I'm going to do what is right before God, then it should go well, right? Well, day after day, she kept hitting on him, and one day, conveniently, coincidentally, there's no guys in the house except for Joseph. So she throws herself at him. And she's all over him like a wet blanket. And never mind, TMI. Okay, but Joseph is like, excuse me, no, sorry, no, yours, and whatever. And she starts to undress him. Like she's ripping at his clothes, and he's like, all right. And he comes out of his coat. Now he would have also, as the head, even though he was a slave, clothes indicated things. He would have had a garment that wasn't like all the other slaves in the house, because he's the head slave. So I don't know what's with this guy, but once again, his coat gets stripped off. There's this thing with coats in this story. So then she yells, because he's gone. He's out of there. And she yells, and so all the guys come running in. Yes. And she goes, oh, look, Joseph tried to attack me. And I screamed so hard. And he ran away, but he left his coat here. And they're going, we heard you call it. I was in the house, but we didn't hear you screaming. So they're like, okay. So then her husband comes home, and she's like, look, honey, love of my life, sweetie. I love you and only you. Joseph did this. Look, he left his coat. Vile man. And of course, I mean, Potiphar, he loses it. And the thing is, by the way, that's a very common thing. When we don't do what people want us to do, they hurt us. That's a very common reaction. It's like, okay. So just so you know, Potiphar should have killed him. He had every right to, on the spot. So you got to wonder what happened. Does it say? Well, I think he just looked at him, and Joseph just looked at him. And he's like, yeah, I know you didn't sleep with my wife, but I got a problem now because she told all the servants, and I got to do something. But he didn't want to kill him. He knew who he was. And when we live a certain way, even when we get falsely accused, people will know, yeah, no. People that matter. So he threw him in jail. And he had to pay a price for something he didn't do. I have to do something, and I didn't even, it's not my fault. Who's been there? So here's the thing. He lost his first robe, which was his identity. I'm a prince. And then he lost his second one, which was his position. I'm a leader of leaders. Like he governed the whole house. So then the next line, it says, the Lord was with Joseph in prison. Now I would just say, excuse me, Lord, if you're with me, I shouldn't be in prison. Anybody? Hello. That's kind of what we do. Excuse me, God. But he was with him in prison. And he didn't curl up into a little ball. And he didn't get mad at God. And he didn't spew bitterness toward everybody who had wronged him, because Joseph had had a dream or two. And see, when he got thrown in the pit and he got sold as a slave, he's like, oh yeah, but I had this dream, it hasn't happened yet, so this isn't how the story ends. And then it's like, oh yeah, well, this is good, it's not whatever, but better than being in a dry well. And then he goes to jail, which is forever. There wasn't really a court system. Oh yeah, this is your punishment. You go to jail for so many years. He just went to jail forever. And he knew that when he went in. But it says the Lord was with him. And he said, it's okay. My dreams haven't come to pass yet, so I don't know how the story ends. But if I'm going to be in jail, I'm going to make it the best it could be. So what happened was the warden did what Potiphar did. He put him in charge of everything. Just this little pattern here. Because he keeps acting the same way. And it says, because God favored him so much, the warden didn't pay any attention to what he did, just like Potiphar. And everything that Joseph did prospered. I didn't know exactly what jails look like, a prosperous jail, but it was better. He made it a better place. And then he's in there for like years and years and years and years and years. And one day, the warden says, hey, Joe, I got 2 new guys for you. They're a little important. The king of Egypt, his name was Pharaoh, and I don't know what happened, but his butler and his baker, he threw them both into jail at the same time. Now, I have a little theory. You want to hear it? I think that kings are a little bit neurotic. Because, see, the butler, his job was to give the king his wine glass to drink. But before he gave it to the king, he had to drink some. And then they waited to see if he'd fall over and die. That's how you protect yourself when you're a king. So that was his job, was to make sure that nobody tainted the wine to kill him. It's a pretty important job. So I don't know whether he had gastrointestinal distress or what. And just so you know, the practices of hygiene in Egypt were not top-notch. We're not talking they didn't wash their hands. We're talking that this is what the doctors did. If you got a wound, they covered it with dung, as in manure, as in animal excrement. There, you cover it up, and then we'll check it later and see if it's healed. And, it's like too late, they died. Because you get something through your blood. So, I don't know if he got a little tummy ache, and he goes, I don't know if it was the wine, I don't know if it's the food, you're both going to jail. So he throws them in. And Joseph takes care of them. And one morning he walks by and he's like, sup guys? Because they're visibly distressed. And they're just sitting there. he goes, tell me what's going on. And they're like, we both had dreams. We both had dreams. And there's nobody here because, like, in the palace, there's people that's their job to interpret dreams. There's nobody in here, and we don't know what to do because we've had these dreams. So Joseph says, interpretation of dreams belongs to God. Tell me your dreams. I know God. I hear God. Duh. So the butler goes, okay, I'll go first. He said, there was a vine, grapevine, butler, wine, got it? He said it had 3 branches, and there were blossoms on the branches, and they immediately turned to grapes, and I squeezed them in Pharaoh's cup, and I handed it to him to drink. And Joseph said, okay, in 3 days, Pharaoh's going to put you back in your position. He's like, okay. So the butler's, he's like, I'm a happy man. And Joseph goes, you need to tell him. Promise me, when you get out of here, you will tell him about me. Will you tell him about me? That I'm a really good dream interpreter? Because it's something that they had dream interpreters in the court. He's like, I'm also innocent. Tell him about me. He's like, absolutely, I will. And then the baker has his turn. He goes, I also had 3. I had 3 baskets on my head. The top one was full of baked goods, and birds came and ate out of it. And Joseph said, okay, in 3 days, Pharaoh's also coming. He said, but he's not giving you your job back. He's going to hang you from a tree. How he got that from that, I don't know. But he said he's going to hang you from a tree, and the birds are going to eat your flesh. There's going to be nothing left of you, and they're not even going to be able to bury you. He said, I liked his interpretation better. So 3 days later, guess what? It's Pharaoh's birthday. And he's feeling good. So he calls them both out of jail. And he says to the wine cup passer, the butler, you get your job back. And he says to the baker, you're done. And they hang him. The birds eat the flesh off his body, and there's nothing left to bury. Now, I don't know about what happened to the butler. He's probably really excited. He's like, I'm back with my family, who I never thought I'd see again. I've got my job back. I'm alive. I don't know if I want to remind him that he put me in jail. I don't know if it was that or he just in excitement forgot, but he forgot. So here's Joseph in jail still, and a day or 2 goes by, and it's like, well, okay, they were having a party. It's like a week goes by. It's like, maybe didn't have opportunity. And after months and months, it's like either he forgot or Pharaoh wasn't interested. 2 years go by. Longer than we've been in this. And he's still sitting in jail. And 2 years go by. And Pharaoh has a dream. And none of the dream interpreters can interpret his dream. And the butler goes, oops, I forgot. There's this guy. And he tells him, and he's like, okay, go get him. So they call for Joseph to come immediately, and he says no. He said, I'm not going. He says, I need to wash, I need to shave. I am taking off this robe. I mean, they didn't have like orange jumpsuits, but they had something, right? He says, I'm not wearing this in the presence of the king. It would be dishonoring to him. And this is not who I am. This is something that I've experienced. This is my past, and I am not taking my past into my future. When this is over, and it will be, don't carry it into your future. Don't let this be what defines your life. Because it's just for starters, like I'm old. Trust me on this. This is just a little bit. Do you know how long he was in there? 13 years. He was 17 when he was thrown in his brothers threw him in the well. By the time they called him out of jail, he was 30. Whoa. 13 years. So this is Pharaoh's dream. He said, okay, I had this dream, and I saw 7 sleek, fat, handsome cows, and they were coming out of the Nile. And these things were like, and they were just massive and incredible. And then behind them came 7 emaciated, gaunt, ugly. Pharaoh said, I have never seen a cow this ugly. And it came out, and it ate the first. All these 7 cows ate these 7 cows. And I can't even get my head to go there, but they did. And he said, but when they were done, they were just as skinny as when they started. He says, and then I fell asleep. And I had another dream. And I dreamed, and he says there was a stalk of grain. And on the grain there was, on every stalk of grain is 1 ear of corn. I Googled it. But on his stalk of grain, there were 7 ears of fat. Awesome. Ears of grain. And then there was another stalk, and it had 7 really, really bad, dried out, blight, gray, nothing in the kernels, ears of corn. And these ate those. I don't know how that happened, but that's what he saw. And when he said to Joseph, at first he said, like, I had these dreams, I don't know what to do. And Joseph says, interpretations belong to God. Tell me your dream. So he does. And Joseph says, this is exactly what's going to happen. Because you've had 2 dreams in a row and they're the same, this is like God saying, this is really serious business. And this is going to happen for sure. Not maybe. He said there's going to be 7 years of ridiculous plenty. Like plenty. Like those fat cows. And then there's going to be 7 years of drought. And there's going to be hunger, there's going to be famine. It's going to be so bad that when everything's over, the entire land, it's going to be decimated. So he doesn't stop there. He says, I suggest, he's 30, never been in Pharaoh's presence before, interprets a dream and then proceeds to tell him exactly what he should do. He said, I suggest you choose a proficient, discreet, and wise man and set him in as governor. Let him appoint officers over every region so that you can control things by region. Take 1/5. Those 7 things, that's going to be so much harvest, they're not going to be able to handle it. Take 1/5 of the harvest every year for 7 years and build big warehouses and store it up so the rats and things can't get to it and it doesn't get all wet and moldy and all this other stuff. It's safe. And then when the bad years hit, you'll have something, rations that you can give to the people. And Pharaoh says, that's brilliant. I pick you. You came up with the plan. God showed you this, so who could be more intelligent than you? Pays to listen to God. So he says, you will be next to me and in charge of everything except matters of the throne. I didn't know what matters of the throne are. You sit there with your scepter. People come to see you. You do what? Joseph does all the work. Kind of what it sounds like to me. He went from prison to a prince in 1 moment. Actually, it was 13 years, wasn't it? But Pharaoh, he put on clean clothes, but Pharaoh put on like royal robes. And it says he put a gold chain around his neck, and not like, like even guys that wear Mr. T. This was a big, thick thing. It would have been heavy, and it went, and then it would scoop in the back. He put that on him. He gave him his signet ring. So he didn't have to ask Pharaoh to do anything. Anytime he wanted to do something, he'd write it up, they'd put wax. He'd put the ring in it for the seal, and he could do whatever he wanted. He gave him a chariot with horses, and everywhere that the horses went with their, stuff, the people bowed down to him in all of Egypt. Wherever he went, everybody was bowing to him. He was second to the king. And the very first thing he went and did was he checked out all the land. If you've been in prison and couldn't go anywhere for like 13 years, you'd go check out the country too. I'd be like, oh, look, there's a 7-Eleven. Stop there. Okay. Woo, whatever it was. And he built warehouses everywhere so the people, because when you don't have a lot of food, you don't want to waste a lot of calories traveling. So he put, he's brilliant, isn't he? So he put warehouses all over. He got married and he had 2 sons. And he named one Made Me Forget, and he named the other one Fruitful. Now, it was actually Manasseh and Ephraim, but that's what Manasseh's name. He says, you made me forget all my trouble, all the hardships, and you made me forget my family. And his second son was called Fruitful, even though I was afflicted. Even though things were absolutely awful, I was fruitful. It didn't matter what was going on in the whole world. My life's okay. Better than okay. That just blows my mind. Because I remember 17 and I wasn't exactly there. So then the famine hits. So he's now 37. People are hungry and they're on rations. And when people are hungry, I'm just going to throw this out there, I think there's a tendency to lie. So they would come up, yes, I'm here to get my rations. I have 22 children, and I have 8 widowed sisters that I have to take care of, and then there's me and my wife and her parents, 34 of us. Joseph's like, yeah, right. Because, one thing about being in jail, you might be naive going in, but you're not naive coming out. You can learn to spot a liar in there, just thinking, possibly. So he learned in jail. God actually equipped him for something that he wouldn't have been equipped to do any other way. And by the way, his great-grandpa and his grandpa have traveled down to Egypt and had stayed there during other times. This didn't happen because God did this to him. God could have got Joseph to Egypt any other way. But the devil tried to destroy his life and stop the dreams from coming to pass because they meant something. And God said, that's the best you got. It doesn't matter what you do to this boy. I'm going to lift him up because I love him. So, back at the ranch, Jacob, his dad, hears that there's grain in Egypt. And he says, what are you boys all doing looking at each other? Because it's what it actually says. He's like, why are you looking at each other? Don't just sit there. Go down to Egypt. We've heard there's grain in Egypt. Go get some before we all die. And they went, except for Benjamin. Benjamin's the youngest. It was Joseph's younger brother. It was his full brother. And his dad's like, yeah, no, Benjamin's not going with you. My baby's not going with you. This baby was about 30-ish by then. But their mom had died. Rachel had died. Joseph had died. And he's like, this is the last one I got. I'm not losing this boy. You're not taking him. You guys go. But bring back enough for me and bring back enough for his family too. He's not going. So they arrive. And they promptly, because this is culture, and they're from another land and they want something, they really, really need something. They get there and they see the guy in charge and they run and they all bow down in front of him. They're on their faces. And the guy that's in charge, he starts grilling them. He's like, where are you guys from? You're dressed different, you look different, where are you guys from? And they told him, they says, they're like, well, we're from far, far away. And he's like, no, you're not. Our land is like wrecked right now. We're really weak and you are spies. You have come to spy out the land. No, we're all from one family. It's just one little family. And it's like, and we got another brother, but he didn't come, and our dad's here. It's just, no, you're not. You're spies. And they're like, oh my goodness. And he said, you have to prove it. It's like, go get your little brother. No, we can't. No, we can't go do that, Kate. I'm putting you all in jail till he comes. And he lets them sit there for 3 days. And then all of a sudden, he goes to them. Come on out. He's like, I fear God. I'm a nice guy. He said, so one of you stays as collateral. The rest of you go home. You get me. And your families need food. So he sends them home to get food, and he leaves Simeon in jail. And they start traveling. And all of a sudden, one of the guys stops to get some grain out to feed his donkey. And it's like, oh, my money is in the top of my sack. And they said, well, how on earth did that happen? They should have taken it out before they started filling it. And they all looked, and every one of them had their bags of money in their sack. So they're driving home, looking over their shoulder the whole way, going like, I don't know what happened, but they're going to accuse us of stealing this. We didn't do this. So I have to stop because I missed a part. I start telling stories. I miss a part. While they're in jail, Joseph is listening to them talking because Joseph was the governor they all bow down to, so first dreams come to pass. And they're all speaking, and he can understand them because they're speaking Hebrew. And when they're in jail, they're going like, this is a consequence of our guilt. We are reaping what we sowed. We were really mean to Joseph. He cried. He's like, let me out of this pit. And we laughed at him, and we mocked him, and then we sold him. He begged us to let him go. We did not do it. And Reuben pipes up, I told you so, but none of you listened to me. This is justice. His blood is on our hands, and now we got to pay. So they have no idea that Joseph is standing there listening to them. It's kind of, because he's been speaking to them through an interpreter. I don't know, he choked up when he saw them. He actually left. Every time they came, he would say, excuse me, and he would go and cry because he missed his family. But I think it would have, and he was testing their hearts because that was a pretty ugly, awful thing to do. Is my little brother still alive, or did you go home and do something to him too? A little bit of trust issue, we can understand that. So they get home, they're eating everything, and they tell Dad what happened, and he's like, yeah, Joseph's gone, Simon's there, like I'm ever going to see him again. You're not taking Benjamin. Put his foot down and said no. So they waited and they waited, and then finally the boys came and they said, Dad, if we don't go, our wives and our kids are going to die. We have to go, and we cannot go without Benjamin. He said, fine. But if he does not come back, it's on you. I will die from grief. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't lose one more. So he does something really interesting this time. Jacob prepares this whole package of the best things that they have. Resin and balm and almonds and stuff. And he sends it to Joseph. He sends it with the boys. When you go, I've never actually seen the Queen of England, but I heard that if you go to visit, you take a gift. Is that true? Mm-hmm. It's a way of honoring. For somebody of equal hierarchy, when you take a gift and give it to them, it's like recognize who they are. So his dad, remember the sun, moon, and stars? By his dad sending this gift, he is lifting Joseph up above him. That's pretty wild. I know. So they get there, and Joseph's watching. He goes, okay, Benny's here. Benny's here. Okay, this is good. So he tells his servant, take him to my house for lunch. And they're going like, why are we here? Where you're at Joseph's house. And he's like, oh man, we're in trouble. They're gonna be like, they're gonna think we took the money, so we have to tell them right away. So he said, hey, you need to tell them, like, this weird thing happened, like we started traveling, and our money that we were gonna pay for, it was still in our bags. And the guy goes, your God must have done that, because it says here you paid. Now you know Joseph had integrity, so if he sent their money home with him, who paid for the wheat? Joseph did. He paid for his brother and the whole family's food for like months and months worth of food. You got to know his heart's, he's maybe struggling, do I trust his brother? But you have to know he's just chosen to forgive them, and he loves his brothers. Wild. So they're like, okay, and they said, well, we had to tell you right about, because they're talking again to each other, and it's like, if we don't fix this, they're going to put us in jail, and they're going to seize our donkeys. And I'm like, seriously, your dad's going to die if none of you come back, and you are worried about your donkeys. These guys, there's probably a reason God picked the 11th child. I'm just saying. There's something going on there. So Joseph comes in. He says, okay, I'm finished up with my stuff. How's your father? He's good. He's fine. Still alive? Yes. Okay. They present the gifts, and they all hit the deck and bow before him again. And he says, excuse me. And he runs to the back room, and he cries. He pulls himself together, and they have lunch. But not at the same table. Because like Egyptians, we don't eat with Hebrews. So he's not really, really close to them. But he gets a table, and he set the table, and he had them sit in order of age. And they're going like, what is going on? Like, how would he know this? Do you think it's just an accident? And then Benjamin, I think the table tipped because they gave Benjamin 5 times as much food and everything else as the rest of them. And they're going like, what is this with him and Benjamin? They're like, seriously, we don't like favorites. So they're eating, and it's a party. They're eating and drinking. They are having a really good time. He's like, okay, time to go home. He said, I've had your sacks have been filled with grain. Everything's good. But he told us, and put their money back on top again, and the money they brought. Send it all home with him. And then he says, take my silver goblet, like this is the most precious thing, and put it in the sack of the youngest one. And their servants are like, yes, sir, okay. So they do it, and they leave, and he's like, are they out of the city yet? He says, yeah, they're just out of the city. He says, okay, go get them. So his head servant goes up, and they go, stop. And he says, how could you guys do this? He fed you at his place. He treated you with everything, and you turn around and you respond like this. And they're going like, we didn't do anything. We didn't do anything. And he said, you stole his silver goblet. We did not, and whoever did, he'll be his slave forever. So they open up the oldest. They started the oldest. They worked their way down. They open up his sack, and it's like, the money's in there. Both monies are in there. Oh, and they go down, child. These guys are like old by now, and they get, every time they get down closer, that the chances increase, and then there's only one sack left, and it's Benjamin's. And they open up that sack, and he whips out this silver goblet, and they're going, "We didn't do it! We did not put it in there!" And they scream, and they rent their clothes, and they're upset, and it's like, no, because they said, we'll all go to jail. If it's in there, we'll all go to jail. And he says, yeah, he doesn't want you all. He only wants Benjamin. They're going like, no. So, I mean, the journey back into the city, and they throw themselves on their faces and bow down again before Joseph. And they said, we don't know what happened. We did this. And he says, you think you could hide? I see everything. Well, I saw it because I put it in there, but And they said, we'll all be your slaves. He said, I don't want you all, I just want that one. He said, no. So Judah comes really close, and he says, could I speak with you privately for a minute? Joseph, there's still an interpreter. And he says, fine. So he tells, you have to understand, our father will not survive this. His wife has died. Her firstborn has died because they think he's dead. And if we go home without Benjamin, the grief will kill our father. And this is what he said. This is really cool. So those of you who kind of know a little bit about this, you'll go like, oh, wow, that's such a God thing, because he puts things in stories. So Judah, Jesus came from Judah. He said, I'll take his place. And that's what Jesus did when he died on the cross for us. He said, don't make him pay, I'll take his place. It's just like a cute little thing in the middle of the story. I got goosebumps. Okay, so he says, take me instead. And then Joseph goes, clear the room. And they all run, the servants all clear the room. And so his 11 brothers are standing there in front of him, and they're looking at him because they're like, okay, I know what he's going to do now, because he doesn't speak Hebrew and we don't speak Egyptian. And they're just standing there. And he says to them in Hebrew, I am your brother, I'm Joseph. And he lost it. He cried so hard. Because up until that point, he wasn't reunited with his family yet, because they didn't know who he was. And he fell on Benjamin's neck, and he cried. He did the kiss thing, cultural, 2 cheeks, 3 times if you're French. And they wept so loud that everybody that was outside could hear him, and they go like, okay, and they're like, okay, he told us to go out. Are they killing? Like, they didn't know what was going on, because he's just wailing. Because his heart had been broken, and he was back. So he kind of messed with them a little bit. And then he said, the very, very first thing he said to them is, you need to forgive yourselves. You need to forgive yourselves, because God sent me ahead of you. He didn't just send him to save Egypt. It clearly says that the entire known world, the drought was so bad that the entire known world would have experienced this 7-year famine. And they wouldn't have so many people, so few people would have survived. Not only that, Jacob's family, Joseph's dad and all his brothers, they would not have survived. And that's the family that, as I said, Jesus came out of. So God made it so that Joseph, who's a picture of Jesus, could save the world on just a natural physical level. And they promptly went back and got his father, and he lived another 17 more years. And it's a really, really great story of how somebody went through something really hard, but because they knew God, and God had clearly shown him in the dreams, there's a purpose for your life. I need you to lead somewhere. And you can just go like, okay, well, he affected millions of people. And it's like, yeah, but that's because God was doing this picture thing. Because like Joseph is a picture of Jesus. Jesus left his father. He stripped off everything that said he was royalty. He put on human flesh. How constricting that must have been. And came and lived in the world. He got And Jesus served everybody. He made everybody's life better, just like Joseph did. And then he got accused of things he didn't do. And he had to pay the penalty for things that he didn't do because Jesus didn't sin at all. So the penalty he paid was for our sins. Boom. And then he went into like hell, which is like jail. It actually says there, it describes people that were in waiting, and Jesus went to preach to them. And they were prisoners, and they were in this holding place till Jesus died and rose again. And then he said, "Hey, I paid for your sins. Do you want to accept it?" And they're like, "Yeah." And so then he came up out of, just like Joseph came up out of the prison to save the world, Jesus came up out of hell because he defeated death, and he saved the whole world from the beginning of time till the end of time. So, yeah, don't compare yourself to Joseph because God was making a picture with him. But this is how God thinks. One person is as important as a million. So if God put you on this earth to change one person's life, you have purpose. And it's important. So when we hear things like, "Oh, you'll never get over this," we have to understand that all words, everything we hear comes from 3 sources. I have taught you guys this before. Do you know the answer? Oh, I thought you were going to put up your hand. Everything, we hear things from God. If it's true, if it's good, if it's you're accepted and I love you the way you are, that's God's stuff. Now, the devil's called the father of lies. God gave him an extra little name. You're the father of lies. In other words, he couldn't tell the truth if he tried. And he doesn't want to. So when we hear things and they're lies, they actually don't they're originating from the devil. And it's evil. And he wants to kill, steal, and destroy. So this is, this thing of like, oh, youth nowadays will never recover from this. He's trying to kill your future. He's trying to steal your future. He's trying to destroy your vision of what could I do with my life? Because you think it's like, well, what this, it's going to be like this forever. And I've been through some things. And this is like a very small thing. But when I was pregnant, you're like, really, Charlene, you're going there? But I would throw up from morning till night. Just about like morning till night. There's a medical name for it, which after 3 babies, I still didn't learn the name of. But the minute I woke up, I didn't have morning sickness. I had all-day sickness until I went to bed. And so the first time I had a medication that they took off the market because they couldn't tell if it caused birth defects or not. So by the time I went to get my second baby, I'm on long-lasting gravel. And I don't know if you know anything about gravel, but it makes you really sleepy. So I wish I slept all through my pregnancies, but I didn't. But I knew I was in labor when the nauseous, yeah, throwing up stopped. I'm like, oh, it's not Braxton Hicks, it's whatever. I am no longer nauseous. We're having this baby. And the thing is, you think when stuff, and that was just 8 months, because so for the first month you kind of don't know you're pregnant. And I know it's like you feel like this is never going to end, that you're going to feel like this every day, but you don't. And, we were listening to some worship songs last night, and one of the lines in one of them was, if it's not good, God's not done. So this isn't finished yet because it's not good yet. And I don't care what people are saying. I do not care what people are saying. This is not going to be forever because I talked to God and I heard him say. And the devil, this is evil. And the devil's messing with some things, but God's like, I'm fixing some things underneath all of this, and when it's done, it's going to be good. And you guys need to be ready to just be already running into your future, because God has good things for you. The devil always tries to abort things. He always tries to stop things from happening. He always tries to stop our lives. He tries to stop me from having fun. I don't like that either, because we were supposed to laugh and enjoy life. So my point is, we need to identify the source. So if you've heard that, and you might hear it yet if you haven't, you have to go, yeah, that's from the devil, and that's a lie, because God said it's going to be done, and it's going to be good. And then once you hear something, you have to either call it a truth or a lie. I mean, there's only two choices. So easy, I can do this. And then we have to understand that our emotions always react to, like that thermostat on the wall tells me what temperature it is. It doesn't make it that temperature, it just tells me what it is. If I want to make the temperature change, I have to move something, I have to adjust something. So we can change our thoughts and we can change how we feel, because God designed us that way. He gave us control, because he wants us to be in control of our lives. And like the last season, if there's one thing people have felt, it's powerless. It's like, I'm out of control. Everybody's making all these decisions, and I have no control over my life. Does anybody feel like that? Joseph, slave, in prison. I got no control. When you're a slave, you have no control. But he did. He took control of absolutely everything he could. I'm taking control of my thoughts, and I'm taking control of what I'm doing. Because that's all God holds us responsible for. The rest he says, I'll fix. So we just have to take control of our life. And the other thing is we have to not be afraid. God didn't create us to feel fear and to be afraid. Like, we weren't designed by God to live in fear. So this is really messing with us. We sang a lot of songs about fear this morning. When you know what God says and what God's doing, and when you know that he loves you, and when you know, I have a purpose, I got a dream, and I'm in the pit, but my brothers haven't bowed to me yet, so this isn't the end. Like, see, that's what you can do. That's how you make it through things. You hear God say something, and then you go, okay, this hasn't happened yet, so it's not over. God he loves us, and he is never out of control. He is the all-powerful one. And he created you, and he has a purpose for your life. So I want to pray right now. That's a good story. Yay. I know. I've known that story probably since I was 6 years old, which is 54 years for those of you who can't do the math. And I have never, ever, I would have never, I would have never, ever thought that it would apply. That's the cool thing about the Bible. It applies to now. Like, to now. And it gives us hope. So, Father, that's one thing that I pray. Okay, yeah, I'll stop and back up. We need to forgive people. We need to forgive people who've said them some things. I'm sure that psychologist felt like he was being well-meaning. I'm not exactly sure why, or how he could think that. But we need to forgive people who've been declaring things over our lives. One of the biggest things is, if you get this, you'll die. That's a lie. That's a lie. And it makes people afraid. So we have to forgive people, because that's the only way we're going to come out of this. So, Father, let's pray together. Father, we forgive people who've been speaking lies. And God, I ask you to forgive me for believing lies and living like the lie is a truth. And I thank you that you give me hope, that you have a purpose for my life, that I don't have to live with anxiety. I can still have fun, and I can enjoy this season, because you said it's going to end good. And so, Father, I just pray over everybody. I bind up anxiety, I bind up fear, I bind up hopelessness, and I bind up powerlessness. Jesus, you said your words, the things you say that are truth, that's what sets us free. So, God, we're choosing today to live by the things that you say, to live by truth. And Father, I pray that we would all hear your voice better. God, some of us need dreams. You don't speak to everybody all the time through dreams, but you speak through dreams a lot. Sometimes you just speak things to our heart, and sometimes you speak to us things like this whole story. You speak to us things from the Bible. But God, we have to be listening. And the other thing we ask forgiveness for is we've been listening to a lot of junk and a lot of things that aren't you. And so if we listen to you like a minute a week, and we listen to all the lies and everything else like 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, God, it's not going to balance out. So help us to not listen to things. We're responsible to not listen to things that are not good for us. And so, God, we're going to set our hearts to listen to you more. We're going to ask you questions, and we're going to wait for your answers. And Father, the peace that we have comes from knowing that you love us unconditionally. And so I pray, God, that we will just, like Joseph, didn't matter where he was in your peace, because he knew you loved him. And Father, I pray that each and every one of us believes that that's true, and that we would open up our hearts and say, God, I'd like your love to come in. More love, God. We need more of your love, and we ask for it today. In Jesus' name, amen.